This is the Debunking Economics Podcast with Steve Keen and Phil Dobbie.
The Archives.
Episode 364. BRICs wouldn't be silly enough to develop a gold-backed currency, would they?
Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. These 5 countries are together called BRICs.
Now, if those countries want their own currency, they can do it. And that's going to be an impact to the reserve currency of the United States.
In a divided world, this group may emerge as a force to reckon with.
This is the Debunking Economics Podcast with Steve Keen and Phil Dobbie.
This week, the new BRICs trading bloc. There are so many stories around about the idea that they want to create their own trading currency, which kind of makes sense if you want to do business with each other without resorting to the US dollar, a bit like the old ECU in Europe before the euro came along. But what is curious is the number of people suggesting that this new currency, this new trading currency, will be backed by gold, as if that's going to make it more valuable. Do people really hark back to the glory days, supposedly, of the gold standard? Is that really a good idea? That's this week on the Debunking Economics Podcast. So we got rid of the gold standard for good in 1971, I think, wasn't it? When we finally kissed goodbye to the gold standard. Have I got my timing right?
Pretty close, 71, yeah.
And, well, maybe not for good, though, because BRICs, the nations, so what is that? That's Brazil, Russia, India.
And China.
And there's a few others vying to be part of this, not the West regime, who want to introduce a new trading currency. We've talked about that in the past, but I've been reading increasingly about the idea that this might be backed by gold.
Oh, my God.
So you wonder how that's going to work. The biggest buyers of gold from 2010 to 2022 were Russia, buying 1,650 tons of gold over that period, followed by China buying 956 tons, and Turkey buying 425 tons. So we've talked about the idea, Steve, of a BRICs trading currency before and thought, well, that makes perfect sense. But why would they see the need to have it backed by gold? What's their thinking?
Oh, back in ideology again. Money should be a commodity.
Yeah.
That seems to be the idea. They're literally talking about basing it on gold rather than the size of the economies.
Well, I think it's hearsay, but I think, but I've read it in a few places now. So whether it's right or not, just it's an opportunity for us to talk about the idea of, because there are enough people. Well, like a whole load of people who've been investing in Bitcoin are doing it because they are gold. A lot of them believe in the gold standard and think that that we went wrong.
Dipping from gold bugs to Bitcoin bugs.
Yeah, because it's constrained by size, as opposed to obviously fiat currencies, which are variable. So I can only think that these nations are thinking, well, if we're backed by gold or we're constrained in the size of our currency,
then we've got to behave properly.
And it's going to have more value. It's a regime that we can follow, and it's going to have more value against those fluctuating Western currencies where you never quite know how many of them there are. That would be the thinking, presumably.
I imagine so. Yeah.
So where does it go wrong for them? What are the constraints?
Well, I mean, you come back to what is money. That's the initial, and what form of money works best if you are in the situation where you want to have your economy grow over time. Okay. But again, I've got to put the caveat about climate change and what we're about to face, but take us back to the 1900s and say what system will lead to the fastest rate of economic development. And the gold bug argument is that you have to go to trust in the value of money. Okay, it's the price of money that matters the most, and therefore they think, well, gold is
will inflate the value of money.
Yeah, well, if money is gold, then you can't create more of it easily. There's only a certain amount of gold on the planet. It's constrained, and that'll mean it keeps its value. So maintaining the value of the money is a huge obsession with gold bugs and Austrian economists and all that mob and so on. And they think that the fact that the money reduces in value over time is a sign of a failed system. So if you have inflation and driving down the value of money, they say, well, that's a sign of have a poor form of money. And with gold, you can't have inflation reducing the value of gold, so gold will have a firm value, and that'll enable the physical transactions in the economy to work effectively.
Right. But how does it, if you've got a constrained amount of money, but you've got production going up, then
the prices have to be falling over time to enable that to happen.
So it's deflationary.
Yeah, you in a sense, you need things to be getting cheaper. Over if you're going to have a fixed amount of money or a fixed money supply and a growing economy, then you've got to have more physical units of output per.
I'm a factory that makes a widget, and in 10 years' time, I can make 2 widgets just as effectively, and I can sell those 2 widgets, but there's only the same amount of money.
They're going to be sold for half the price they were initially. That's the sort of vision that the gold bug world has, I believe. Any gold bug wants to contradict me, please write a note to Phil, and we can take it from there. But that's the fundamental idea. The value of the monetary measuring stick has to be constant in their attitude. And that's a lot of the reasons why gold bugs support the idea of a gold-backed currency, or using gold literally as your currency over fiat money and credit money. And they also say, look, 100% of fiat systems have failed in time. Whereas gold continues.
Also failed.
Huh? What? Sorry, you're taking my line away.
Otherwise, we'd still be there.
What they're fundamentally saying is we don't live in an Egyptian empire or Sumerian empire. Empires fail, and when the empires fail, the money that the empire enforces also fails. But and the other way, they say, well, it's actually the money that failed, and therefore the empire collapsed. It's the other way around. The British, with the dominant monetary system on the planet until the 1930s, they were the dominant monetary system because they were the dominant empire. They fail during the Second World War, and the Americans take over. So it's not that fiat currencies fail; it's that nations fail. And then when the nation fails, the currency goes with it. But their attitude is the other way around. And ironically, if you look at it that way, that's why I made the joke about it being Egyptians. If their argument was correct that if the Egyptians had used gold, then we'd still have the Egyptian empire. No, it would have failed at some point. Okay, its power reach would have collapsed.
So if there was a currency backed by gold, you've got to have enough gold to support that currency. The currency has got to be worth its weight in gold, I guess. And yes, it's got to match the value of the gold backing it. So that is a little bit,
well, it's appealing.
Constraining.
I mean, if it's happening, it's because the people who are arguing for this currency are trying to appeal to the gold bug and the Bitcoin fans of the world. But
if you've got, say you've got, I don't know, 4,000 tons of gold supporting this currency, then that currency can only ever be worth 4,000 tons of gold is worth.
Yeah. And they talk about maintaining a rigid relationship between whatever the note is that reflects the gold and the value of the gold itself. So maintaining the value of the currency at a fixed rate would be an obsession. That's the obsession of the gold bugs. That's if the BRIC groups are talking about this, and they're falling for that same obsession. So it should be backed by a commodity.
So America's got 8,000 tons of gold in its reserves. So 3/4 of their foreign reserves are sitting in gold for historic reasons, I assume. I mean, there's no reason why they have their reserves in gold, particularly, except for that they had it. So they haven't sold it because they can't see any.
Well, if
reason
you want to go back and say when was the American currency in any sense a gold-backed currency? It was until 1981 when until 1968 the price of gold was $35 an ounce.
Yeah,
and then in '68 I think that's when the deregulation occurred. So you had a $35 an ounce price for the official market and a $42 an ounce price for the private market. And then in 71, the gold standard was abolished, so there was no required link between the value of the dollar and the value of gold. And historical elements that people these days might not be aware of is that because America's running a trade deficit, pardon me, because we're running a trade deficit, France in particular is running a trade surplus, and and France accumulated enough gold to be able to enough American dollars, through the trade deficit that America was running, to be able to take those American dollars to the Fort Knox and say, we want 1 ounce of gold for every $35 we're going to give you here, and that would have emptied Fort Knox. So that was the major motivation for moving off the gold standard in the first case.
So what's to stop that not happening again, or happening the other way around? Sort of like, say the currency becomes worth more than the gold that's lying behind.
Well, what you need as a country, you need a country running a trade surplus in the BRIC currency, accumulating enough of the BRIC currency to be equal to the gold holdings, and then say, okay, I now want that gold instead. But it comes back to this confusion that that money is a commodity. That money should be a commodity, and that you can't have a variable currency. That's the whole obsession of people who are.
But even if that was the idea, would it work when, say, you hold 4,000 tons and America's got 8,000 tons? It's like you don't hold the constraining. You don't hold all of the constraining factor.
That's an extra weakness with this current idea. But there's a whole lot of confusions, conflations of issues as to why growth occurred dramatically from 1770 on, and in America from 1840 on. But a very good argument can be made that the flexibility of the fiat currency system and flexibility of the credit system was a major reason why the level of investment occurred in that period. Again, Richard Vague's these two books, the most recent one, The Paradox of Debt, and one before that, my phone just rang, so pardon me, I've got to start that again. Richard Vague's two most recent books, The Paradox of Debt and A Brief History of Doom, both explain that the level of investment that occurred in the 19th century was often credit financed, and a huge part of that investment was credit bubbles and wasted assets and so on. But the growth itself came out of the flexibility of the monetary system. And if you didn't have that flexibility, you might not have had, it's a counterfactual, we can't ever know, but you might not have had the level of growth that went with it as well. So being obsessed about the value, maintaining the value of the currency unit may lead to a lower rate of innovation and growth over time. Whereas people who are fans of this stuff believe that with the value being fixed, you're going to get more growth and more investment over time.
And I wonder also whether it's, you look at some of the currencies involved here, so the Russian ruble, the Turkish, if Turkey got involved as well, because Turkey seems to be being added to this whole thing now.
I find that quite bizarre, but anyway. Yeah.
And, in
most
South
things
Africa
are bizarre
as well.
These days.
And if China was involved, and, so you've got a mix of currencies there. Do we trust those currencies as much as we trust the US dollar, for example? And the answer obviously is no, because these are, they fluctuate a great deal. So if you've got some dodgy currencies in unstable parts of the world, and they all form together to form a currency made up of dodgy currencies, are we going to trust it? So the answer is, well, of course you can trust us, because we've got gold sitting behind us. If it all goes wrong, you can always
where the arguments come from. Yeah, I imagine that's where it's come from.
So if they're in that situation and they feel like that's what they have to do, they are in an impossible way of creating. Because that is an issue, isn't it? How do you create, unless it literally is just a let's trade amongst ourselves currency like the ECU, which makes perfect sense. But even then, they're going to be arguing amongst themselves over the value of each currency. China's not going to be very happy if they see their currency being influenced by countries that they've got no control over,
like Russia,
for example.
Maybe.
Yeah. Or South Africa, or if Turkey,
or Saudi Arabia, definitely.
Yeah. So how does it work in the end? I can't see this happening.
Yeah. I've wanted reforms that move us in the direction of the Bancor, the original idea of the Bancor.
But that's a global thing. So that's
global, and the idea was it's a currency not owned by any particular country, not tied to gold.
So you can take unstable. The whole idea behind that was you can take unstable currencies and help stabilize them, because you've got other stable currencies that help counter all of that.
Yeah, and the more countries you have involved, the less the less dominance of any one currency, and you've got a mix of countries running. Well, if you had every country in the world being part of it, then there's no trade deficit in the aggregate to worry about. But if you have a handful of countries, then you could have trade deficits of some of those countries destabilising the trade surpluses of other countries, and the system could break down.
Yeah. All right. Look, well, there's more of this discussion about the gold standard and the role of currency. We'll come back to that in just a second on the Debunking Economics podcast with Steve Keen. I'm Phil Dobbie. Stay with us.
This is the Debunking Economics podcast with Steve Keen and Phil Dobbie.
So we're talking about the BRICs currencies and whether they want to start a new currency, gold back. But I mean, we're just using whether that happens or not. And obviously it's not going to happen because it's such a crazy idea. But just this idea from the people who do want to return to the gold standard, because fiat currency is such an evil. But I mean, we are talking about gold being a physical commodity in an age where transactions are all done on computer. I mean, we are in an age of digital currencies. It seems an anathema to be talking about something that that is physical, controlling how much we spend in an age where we're just used to not seeing the money we spend.
Yeah, and like the gold itself. Why gold, and what's the value of gold? There's a wonderful exchange between Thomas Edison and journalists when Edison and Ford were trying to get fiat money to be used to create to finance the building of a hydroelectric scheme in a place called Muscle Shoals. This is after the First World War, and Edison was challenged about using fiat currency rather than using gold, and the journalist saying we should be using gold as our currency. And Edison said it's not gold that sets the value of the currency, it's the currency sets the value of gold. And he used the example of silver, the silver dollar. And the silver dollar used to be worth $1. Okay, that was the price it was set at. And then silver, we went from a two commodity system of gold-backed and silver-backed to just gold-backed, and the value of the silver dollar fell to 50 cents. And Edison's argument was it wasn't the silver that set the value of the currency, it was the currency that set the value of silver. Okay? Okay? So this
well, there would always be a circular argument, wouldn't there?
It becomes semi-circular in one sense, but when you look at the political level and say what determines what becomes a currency inside a particular nation, that decision is made by whoever rules that nation. And if they decide to use a commodity and say, we're going to use gold for transactions, then they are actually determining the value of gold. If you use like tally sticks, for example, let's use the UK.
Well, let's say let's imagine, for example, there was a commodity that was only available in those BRICS nations and nobody else had any of it.
Yeah,
I think this is the point you're trying to make. And they said, well, okay, let's base our currency on this commodity that we've got 100% of the world's supply of.
Yeah.
Then the value of that commodity is going to be driven by the value of the currency.
That's right. A political decision is going to be made to determine that value.
Yeah.
And then because of if that currency was, let's say, turkey feathers. We're talking about Turkey a short while. I got turkey feathers. Okay. And you have all the turkeys in the world, of course, come from Turkey.
Yeah.
So therefore, Turkey's got a monopoly on turkey feathers.
We're so informed on this.
And suddenly, turkey feathers are going to be worth a lot more because the valuation is set by the political decision, not the other way around. There's no innate value or price to the object. And the same thing applies to gold. Gold, until we developed silicon computers, gold was a very minor element in any production system. It was ornamental. It wasn't used for a physical basis. So in an ironic sense, we've had the gold bugs are trying to base the currency on something which has no actual use value. In terms of productive, in terms of a use to which it can be put, which is valuable.
Which is why so much of it is sitting in the vaults at the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, who cares? And I think Ford at one point made a comment about how the idea of a gold-based currency is to dig this stuff out of a hole in the ground and put it to another hole in the ground. Okay? The only difference was this hole in the ground had dirt on top, and this hole in the ground has a vault in front of it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the difference.
Yeah.
It's still not even there. And we're saying, that's where all your gold is. Money is fundamentally a promise of a third party that we both accept as ending a commercial transaction between the two of us. So if I wanted to buy that microphone off you, and I'd say, here's going to transfer £1,000 from my account to your account.
You have it for 1,000 if you want.
I know. I'm sure it's going to get
only worth 800.
Definitely going to get a sale here. That is a transfer. The bank's promised to pay me 1,000 to the bank promising to pay you 1,000. So money in that sense is a triangular system. It is a buyer and a seller and a bank. Okay? And that's the actual nature of money. What this whole commodity obsession is based upon is seeing money as like a barter system. You've got something you want to sell, which is the microphone. I've got lots and lots of cups. We want to exchange the two. We work out a relative price between the two. That's the neoclassical fantasy.
Well,
that money would barter.
It's the obsession with scarcity, isn't it?
Again,
There's
yes.
got to be a constraint.
Yeah, scarcity. Whereas the nature of capitalism has been abundance. Too much of it. We actually need to impose scarcity here. I would probably like ultimately to have a monetary system which is based upon scarcity of a range of things.
Well, there we are, Steve. Gold's your answer.
I think it's
Well, in all seriousness,
biodiversity, carbon levels, etc., etc. These are the sorts of things which we need. We need a multidimensional definition of money ultimately to have a sustainable system on this planet.
right? But it's it's sort of a serious question. We're saying it's not going to work because if you want the economy to grow, you've got to have more money to be available.
But if
to
you want
help
to
that
stop
growth
the economy growing,
then you constrain the money supply.
then you want to constrain. So it's a different story.
Right.
Okay?
So then the gold standard makes sense.
Then a standard which relates the level of gold to various physical capabilities of the biosphere. Then it makes sense to start talking about some way of constraining the amount of money, because there's a good argument that having just money as the single-dimensional thing called money as the basis that drives both exchange but also accumulation in our societies, that's why we've ignored the damage we're doing to the biosphere, ignored what we're doing to other species, ignored what we're dumping into the atmosphere, because we're just accumulating more money in the process. So maybe we do need a multidimensional form of money, a form of money which is constrained to elements of the biosphere that must be maintained to maintain life on this planet. So then I've got some sympathy with the idea of a physical constraint to money.
So if we did have that physical constraint, if the world went on the gold standard again, we would... well, first of all, I think we'd have 1/10 of the amount of money we've got now. Total value of money is about, if you look at the broad money, about 90 trillion in circulation.
Yeah.
There's 171,000 tons of gold in the world. So the ratio of money to gold is basically 526 million per ton, but the price of gold is about 50 million per ton. So if we said everyone's going to go back onto the gold standard, then we'd basically devalue currency
by a factor of 10.
Well, that would solve your crisis of the environment, because we wouldn't be able to spend any money on anything. Is this a step in the right direction? It's a shocking step, obviously, because it would completely literally decimate our standard of living. But if we are trying to constrain consumption because we think the planet can't stand it, then is fiat money the way to do it?
Well, fiat money, I think, ultimately is going to be what we need to use to be able to have any chance of hanging on to civilization through the damage from climate change.
Because we've got to create the mitigating circumstances, and we've got to create the investment in things that are going to...
Yeah, we've got to dramatically reduce the amount of waste we dump into the atmosphere, dramatically get away from carbon dioxide, start using our capacities to enhance biodiversity rather than destroying it, take things like plastics out of circulation. That involves a massive level of investment. And to drive that investment, I think fiat currency is the only way it's going to go. But once you get through that, you want to have a form of money that means we don't degrade the biosphere to grow the economy, and therefore physical constraints to the amount of money in creation may well be necessary, and money which is multidimensional. So I've come up with the idea of a parallel carbon currency where everything would have two prices. That's a step in that direction, but it's only a step because you'd also want to be having credits.
But that is constrained.
That is constrained.
So that is like the gold standard.
We've grown too much.
Yeah.
Okay. We've grown far beyond the bounds of this.
So we have fiat currencies that expand as necessary for whatever the mechanism, by whatever mechanism, by issuing of loans by and large, or government overspending. But then we have another currency which is constrained, which is your consumption of resources.
Yeah.
And that would be the equivalent of a gold standard in that it's got a set.
It's saying you're putting some constraint on the monetary system.
Yeah.
Okay. And the constraint would be based on the ecological capabilities of the planet.
So we've got so many tokens or whatever we're going to call these currencies that you have to use whenever you buy anything that has consumed resources from the planet. And you get allocated those, and there's only so many of them to go around. And once you've used them all, you either can't buy anything else, or you have to trade and buy them off somebody else who's going to use less.
Something of that nature. I mean, that's the idea of the tradable universal carbon credits.
Yeah.
And impose it in such a way that it drastically reduces the desire to consume carbon.
So this has been talked about quite a bit lately, hasn't it? I mean, less so since the pandemic, but it was certainly getting some traction before the pandemic.
And they've got a lot more traction afterwards too.
I wonder if it will happen, because there's not many arguments against it, actually, are there? Apart from the usual freedom of choice, blah, 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 and climate change is a hoax, so why do you need to do anything? Apart from those people, the GB News viewers, what argument is there against it?
Well,
the rich have to obviously pay a lot more because they're going to be buying these carbons because they're
the
carbon
idea would
credits.
be the rich would be dramatically have the consumption constrained by the need to buy carbon credits off the poor. The poor would get income distribution coming in their favour because they'd have more carbon credits than they currently consume, and then you'd be doing a similar thing. Fundamentally, you would be tackling one of the major weaknesses of capitalism, and that's not that it's got a flexible monetary system, but that it has such enormous inequality, and that inequality is counterproductive to the sustainability of life on the planet.
So back to BRICS just very finally then. We're jumping about all over the place a bit today, but in a good way.
With gold in our pockets, yeah.
So if BRICS did have a trading currency and it wasn't backed by gold, they just said, well, okay, we need to avoid all these exchange rate fluctuations that we've got between our currencies, which could be quite considerable given the constituent parts. Can they do that without having a shared central bank? Can they just operate, or do they have to go down the road of the European experiment? And wouldn't they be looking at that and going, oh, well, that didn't work out too well?
Well, they could be not as the European experiment as the Bangkok experiment that was never taken on.
Yeah.
And then
but that has to be a global thing. If you're looking at a trading bloc that says, well, okay, we want to try and limit the fluctuations between ourselves so we can trade freely amongst ourselves. And if somebody is buying from us or we're selling to them...
They've got to buy, let's call it the Bancor.
Yeah.
They've got to exchange dollars for Bancor.
Yeah. Then they've got to have a central bank.
Well, they've got to have a central authority. Like the International Monetary Fund was supposed to be the authority that administered the Bancor under Keynes's proposal. So the BRICS would need to have a BRIC Bancor that was the account.
But the idea of the Bancor was that would be a global currency, and it would work out fluctuations across on a global scale.
Yeah. But if you have enough countries joining in, you've got part of the globe, and you'd actually want to encourage.
You'd still be fluctuating against the US dollar, though.
Against the US dollar. But the thing is, then it's a gamble about which block is going to grow, which block is going to become more dominant over time, the American bloc or the BRIC bloc.
But who? So you'd have to have an authority controlling that. And
making sure you don't run too large trade deficits and so on, which of course was a major part of the Bangkok proposal in the first place.
Well,
so
you're not going to get China in on that.
Well, China is running a trade surplus and doing very nicely out of it.
Yeah. So if you say you're making too much of a surplus and you've got to compensate because these people...
That would not be something they do. I imagine the one intention of the BRICS currency is to get larger trade surpluses.
Across the board, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
The limit of trade surpluses is zero. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you are starting from countries like like China, obviously, which has got a huge trade surplus. Russia as well, I think, has a trade surplus still. India, I'm not sure. I think a trade surplus.
Well, you assume if it hasn't, it will.
Yeah.
But okay, so these are all
It would actually be
countries.
surplus versus deficit trade countries. Now, that could be an intriguing little drama.
Yeah. But what about China saying, well, hang on a second, we've got a bigger surplus than you and our currency is stronger as a result of it. You're dragging us down.
But not having a big enough surplus. That could be real fun. I hadn't thought about that particular twist.
But they'd all have to be equal to each other. I mean, if you've got... Someone has to lose out. The moment you start to equalise a currency, someone's got to lose out, haven't they? So... I mean, are they going to agree? And and then there has to be the sort of agreement that you're getting amongst European nations. But these are culturally very different to, the difference that you see within Europe.
I mean, the thing I hadn't thought about before is that one thing behind a BRIC-style currency could be countries which are running trade surpluses that are doing it. So they'd be earning money in their if they're selling through the
whatever we're going to call it.
Let's call it the brick ore. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're selling. They're making. To buy Chinese goods, you've got to buy brick ore. So you convert American dollars into brick ore. So there'd be an exchange rate between the brick currency and the US dollar, and the US would be running a continuous trade deficit with them. So there'd be American dollars accumulating in the brick ore currency vault. We're back with France. We're back with de Gaulle again, and the capacity to say we're going to now use those dollars and come across and buy American assets, or they'd start actually becoming the brick ore currency. It could start trying to take over the ownership of the United States dollar world.
But I just wonder whether that brick ore currency would have a central bank where this money is being
There'd have to be a central bank. There'd be a central authority. Yeah.
And how are these countries, which are quite diverse, going to agree to that? Given
well, if they're all in trade surpluses, they can all agree to it. They'd be pocketing the money in the international. You'd then want to transfer the money back. The trade surpluses get converted back into rubles for the Russians and yuan for the Chinese. But yeah, I've got to sit down and work that one out. That's actually quite an intriguing problem. But if you had if the countries entering into this new parallel global currency were all running trade surpluses, then they're going to be accumulating American dollars and other.
Well, they obviously are intending to be if they're not currently, because they see that as the opportunity. They'll say, well, we're the new world. We're the export nations. You're the import nations. Why, if we are the export nations, would we be dealing in your currency? Because we've got the upper hand.
Well, we're going to be devaluing your currency because we're accumulating the trade surplus.
The US dollar.
I think I've got to spend some time with Minsky and work this one out.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? Well, maybe we'll come back next time and talk about it. We'll give you a chance to...
give me a few weeks.
To work on it. Okay, all right. Well, could next week be a few weeks?
No.
It could be in the time dimension that we're working in at the moment. For reasons that are difficult to explain.
Let's go back to the future some other time.
All right, whatever we're talking about, we'll talk about it next week. That's it for now. Good to talk, Steve.
Bye-bye.
The Debunking Economics Podcast.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, then please share it with your friends, like it on YouTube, and subscribe to this channel.